right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. So today, I want to pick up where I left off yesterday in talking about how the Democratic Party, in my opinion, screwed up, bears responsibility, right down to the way they handled the 2024 election, January 6th, 2025, and the events leading up to the shutdown. I'm not going to be totally negative about them, but I have views, and on yesterday's show, I started talking about those, and today we'll finish up. So where we last left off talking yesterday was the accession of Carter to the presidency. Jimmy Carter, peanut farmer from Georgia, and the hope was that after all that had happened, that Carter would continue the New Deal, but the way Carter responded was to really embrace austerity. In other words, when Carter said Malaise, and he actually didn't say it, but that was the term that was used to describe that awful speech. And I watched it myself, and it's just unbelievably bad. It's just the worst. God, I just can't even describe how bad it is. Go look up the Malaise speech. You won't even be able to get through it. It's so bad. So it was 1979 in the summertime, as I recall. He went to Camp David. He fired half of his cabinet and so forth. And the Malaise he wanted, and I'm doing a little background from yesterday, just to keep you in the loop here. The Malaise he wanted was energy austerity. This is incompatible with the needs of working people. Working people have no tolerance for energy austerity. They have to get to work. They've got to buy gas and so forth. But under Carter, we had gas lines, and we had pessimism, and we had malaise. And this was because he chose to try to base his administration on a demand which was outside the realm of the normal New Deal repertoire. It wasn't Social Security. It wasn't Medicare or Medicaid or any other kind of benefit to working people. So that was Carter. And of course, Carter had been chosen for the post by Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Trilateral Commission. He was a creature of David Rockefeller and the New York banks. So you can see where all that went wrong. And yes, the Trilateral Commission is a thing. It's an actual existing organization. And Dukakis was also really a very, very wishy-washy kind of candidate. Mondale, also fine for Minnesota, but not capable of winning on the world stage. This is the same thing with Bernie. Bernie's great. He's fine for Vermont. Vermont loves him. He's going to be that senator until he chooses not to be. But he can't win, provably, outside of Vermont. He really can't win. AOC is really going to be the same way, in my opinion. She's going to win in New York. If she wants to be the senator in New York, she can be that. But there's just going to be problems. And we're going to talk about this with regard to Mondale in a second. But the same kind of problems are going to be, she insists on calling herself a democratic socialist. And that's not going to play in Peoria, as the saying does. McGovern did a lot to bring about the supremacy of the identity groups, in the sense that he implemented these rules for the Democratic Convention. These ideas that everything had to be balanced among male candidates, female candidates, men and women had to be equally represented on all committees, whatever the abilities were, it didn't matter, had to be equal, and, things of this sort. And this got you into this area that you didn't have a unified party anymore. What you had was a kind of a loose confederation of identity groups, and that's what the Democratic Party has been doing, going all the way back to 1972 in the case of McGovern. Now, after this, Obama. Obama shares with Ricardo this peculiarity of having been chosen by a group of backers, which we can identify as the David Rockefeller Trilateral Commission. And Trilateral Commission, it would be too much to explain all the things about the Trilateral Commission. Trilateral Commission basically believe in three economic zones. And honestly, wanted to break down and has always wanted to break down the mighty industrial economy of the United States and transport that basically to other countries, many of whom are hostile to the United States. This is exactly what happened. So this was done, and Obama was, chosen by the Trilateral Commission, and Trilateral Commission, or the Trilats, as I like to call them, founded by David Rockefeller, at least, and specifically by Zbigniew Brzezinski and other trilateral activists. Obama, his plan, I think that would be Ocasio's too. Get into the Senate, run for president immediately before you have a voting record that you could then be challenged on. So basically, come in there as a kind of a blank slate. So you wouldn't even need an edge of sketch. You've got to make certain promises in the primaries. And the main problem here is the subservience to the banking community. But a lot of people thought that by virtue of being the first black president, Obama would somehow be more radical, more progressive, more generous with the average working family. And it did not occur that way at all. Obama is the triumph of excitement and enthusiasm and energy, but no experience. And did it work? I'm afraid you could say in many ways it did not work. By the time Obama took office, we'd had the crash, the world derivatives panic of September 2008. We had the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers. Virtually everybody in Wall Street was bankrupt imminently or emotionally. And the only way they stayed was because of the Troubled Assets Restoration Program. That's TARP. That's what TARP is. TARP is an acronym for Troubled Asset Restoration Program. And TARP was hundreds of billions of dollars that was used to save the New York banks. They were allowed to keep demanding more bonuses, holiday bonuses, and everything else. And that was paid, in effect, out of public money. Your money, my listeners, the American people, to reward these people who had just destroyed the finances of the country with essentially derivatives, and still going on right now. That's what collapse protocol is all about, which you are beginning to hear me talk about more on the show. Essentially, it's derivatives, structured notes, collateralized debt obligations, all kinds of derivatives piled on top of subprime mortgages, structured notes, all manner of financial engineering that all blew up. Because those things are fine as long as prices are going up. But when prices go down, it's a whiplash effect that multiplies the gravity of the bankruptcy situation. So 2008, 3.1 billion foreclosures, dollars in foreclosures, private homes. Not 3.1 billion people, $3.1 billion in foreclosures. Between 2006 and 2014, of course, not all of that was clear, what that was in our mind. 2008 to 2014, 10 million bankruptcies. What did Obama do to fight this? Well, there was a program. It sounded at least decent, acceptable on paper, but it was not effective. And it was not the remedy. It just went. There were 10 million people thrown out of their homes. And you've got to pay attention, because what we're talking about is the accumulated rage and despair that were necessary ingredients to the rise of Trump. Because, after 2 terms of Obama, what do you get? You get Trump. So Obama could not have been quite that good, could he? If the net result then was the supremacy of Trump. The homeowners were not assisted. I mentioned Preet Bharara was the federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, Lower Manhattan. Did he indict any of the heads of these banks that had fomented all of this? No. He claimed that he indicted about 100 Wall Street individuals, but I think these were little fish. I can't think of any top-level financiers, zombie bankers, hedge fund hyenas, private equity ghouls, who were then brought to justice in the following time. So what Preet Bharara did, I think, was a kind of a cover story. He decided he would attack the 5 families in the New York Mafia. So he was able to indict and convict, I think, 4 out of 5, at least members of the principal families. I think, what did he miss? Colombo. I think he missed Colombo. And also Al-Qaeda. He went after Al-Qaeda and people like this. Al-Qaeda is not organized crime in the same way. Al-Qaeda is something else, but you understand what I mean. This is another thing that Preet Bharara did this, and he went after this because it was a cover story. Now, my critique of this is that it was actually preemptive. At the time of the 2008 primaries and then the 2008 elections, 2 books, Obama, the postmodern coup, Obama, the unauthorized biography. And the basic idea of this is it's not going to end well. And at this point, let's take a break. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. Now, as I was saying before the break, my critique of this, at the time of the 2008 primaries, 2008 election, I guess it didn't, if you had Trump, the idea is just not going to end well. My critique has been that basically the same as Joseph Stiglitz, that the people who grew up in the program of Obama to save, to restore the banks, either those guys were creatures of the banks or are they totally incompetent. Stiglitz also says that he found that maybe Obama didn't start off as devoted to the banks, but as time went on, he became fascinated with the world of the banks and the power of the banks. Yeah, right. Okay, you could say, Jake, you could say, oh, come on, you're so cynical. I don't believe that someone as intelligent as Obama was not always aware of the power of the banks. Maybe he was hooked on it. Maybe he became devoted to it. But I think he was always aware with it. But Stiglitz says he became fascinated by it. And remember that famous and infamous quotation where Obama's meetings at the White House with a bunch of bankers. I think Jamie Dimon is there and so forth. We've got, any of a number of them in the room. And he says, look, guys, I'm the only thing between you here and the pitchforks outside. And honestly, I think this is where the deal was made for Obama's second term. I think it was made at just that meeting and just that moment. It's a long way to see the presidency. We're not there to protect the bankers. And of course, in Obama's inaugural address, as I pointed out in a meeting in North Virginia that very night, that you look at Roosevelt's first inaugural, he says, all Wall Street bankers, money changers, they have failed. The money changers have left their this is Roosevelt, have left their high seats in the temple, and they have failed. Whereas the Obama inaugural address says, we have failed. We have done something wrong, all of us. And this is just not true. So that's the way that problem kept going after those years, because the 70s and the 80s could not The 90s could not be so easily forgotten. If you have two Democratic presidents in a quarter of a century, that's not good. So that's where the disarray of party comes in. Okay, so now more recently, just briefly here at the in 2016, you've got the emergence of Bernie Sanders as an explicit, not a Democrat, but a candidate of the Democratic Socialists of America. And that includes this group of kind of pugnacious plugs known as the Bernie Bros. And the Bernie Bros are there to enforce their orthodoxy on you. This is what I said about the Democratic Socialists. It's really not all happiness and puppies. They're there to enforce an orthodoxy on you. And this was a contest. And, of course, Bernie cried foul. And I guess there was a foul in the sense that the apparatus of the Democratic National Committee did not favor him, because I think you could say they were corrupt, fine, or that they thought he would lose. And I think he would have lost also. And he stayed in the race. He could have graciously bowed out, endorsed Hillary, who probably was the heir apparent, the David Rockefeller heir apparent Trilateral Commission. Because remember what the Trilats want to do. They wanted to break down the American economy, and they got it. They got it done. But they wanted to break down the economy, and she was for it. So he could have gone out on the stump for her, which would be what a Democrat would have been expected to do, at least, after you withdrew. But after the nomination, he stayed in for quite a while. And, of course, in this campaign, we had a lot of bad blood. And this went on. And into 2016, we also had, later, 2018, 2020, we had Elizabeth Warren. And she's the one who says, my groups, I have a panel of groups here, and they're telling me they don't want to have any private insurance. It was the way I understood it at the time, and therefore, we've got to essentially outlaw private insurance. And she also said, we're going to shut down all nuclear reactors immediately. Not even wait for them to use up their fuel or make a transition or build something to replace them. We're just going to shut them down immediately. And this is a real serious problem. You cannot have, and of course this is my opinion, Politics by Jake, you can't have a serious debate about energy if you don't include nuclear, because it's the only viable thing that will carry a net load. None of these other things will carry a net load. And all of the stuff that they talk to you about is nonsense. So anything about nuclear or about energy policy going forward in the United States that doesn't have nuclear, just forget about it. And this is what Warren wanted to do. She said, we're just going to shut them down. We're going to shut them down immediately. So this is a real serious problem, and it was a generalized problem in the 2019-2020 Democratic primary debates. And that's where you get these things about enthusiastic embrace of the gender theory, which I talked about with Kamala Harris, that really did bad things for her campaign in 2020. The embrace of the gender theory and the open border. It was Castro. It was not even a felony. Right now it's a misdemeanor. He said, no, not even a misdemeanor. All right, so you can see this, can't you? If you're asked by a bunch of journalists, raise your hand if you want to have open borders. In fact, a bunch of them raised their hands. Then you can see what the problem is with that. I think they ought to ban that. I think we should just say, no, we're not going to do that this time. We're going to have these nuanced and articulated positions. But we're not the class of adolescents here that raise our hands. And this is the Democratic primary in 2019-2020 that I'm talking about. We're not just a class of adolescents here that raise our hands when we say who's in favor of this or who's in favor of that. And then you have 2018, and that's the year of Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez. So here we are, 2 years into Trump, monstrosities, horrible experiences. And what do we get? We get Ocasio-Cortez backed up by these strange groups, the Justice Democrats, the Democratic Socialists, and Chuck Robardi, and Congress, and there she is. And she surprises Congressman Crowley, a politician who'd been a veteran politician, who'd been around for a while in northern Queens, was in line to become Speaker of the House, and could have done a lot for North Queens. But no, it had to be AOC. It's some money that she got. She got some money, she got some volunteers, and the problem is that people, they feel that this is worth getting out and fighting for, even though in the big picture, it's going to turn out very often to be counterproductive. So we get into these situations where AOC, thanks to the media, this is the biggest concerted media attempt to establish somebody as a national political figure in recent years. All the networks. AOC is the face of the Democratic majority. Very good year. Plus 40 seats approximately. So AOC is there, and you've got Tlaib, and you've got Omar, you've got Presley, and one or two others, and that's the squad. And the squad became the story. And AOC was the leader of the squad. So what happened? What happened to that new majority? They did indict, they impeached Trump not once but twice, which is great. It's what they should have done. But in the process, they lost 13 seats. Now, the question is, and I don't know if there's a poll that says, some political scientists saying, look, if the Democrats lost 13 seats and AOC was the face of the new Democratic majority, is that good? Is that what you want to have? Do you want to do that again? If you're asking me that question, I say no. So you look at all this, and you have to say in some ways it's a sad catalog of lost opportunities and years and decades spent in impotence and isolation and political fiascos. And yeah, this is me, Jake, the Democrat, talking about the Democratic Party in this way. Political fiascos caused by a lack of any kind of centralized direction. In other words, if you could elect a party secretary for the Democratic Party, this might be a good thing to do. And I've said before, you ought to have a Democratic Party press agency. You probably ought to have a Democratic Party website that could put out and popularize and spread the analyses coming from that press agency. You can't simply leave everything to the luck of the primary, because the people who are going to make their own luck are these rich and super rich who can go into those primaries and buy them. And the two cases where the sponsorship is the most obvious, Carter, sponsored by the Trilateral Commission, Obama, sponsored by the Trilateral Commission, Hillary, loved by David Rockefeller, who Hillary loved back, and that's the once again, you have the Trilateral Commission. And you can see these results are not good. Carter, then 12 years of Republican rule. Obama leads to the election of Trump. Why, again, like I said earlier, why do you think that happened? If he was so good, why did that happen? And then after a while, you have Trump's second term. And you have to say, you've got to avoid making these mistakes. These mistakes are too serious to be repeated. And people have a right to demand something better. So, I mean, I think there we are. And at this point, let's take a break. And this is Politics by Jake.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it.
And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And I'm going to continue on this vein because at Politics by Jake, we do political education. I know that you have 6 ways from Sunday. You have the media telling you about what's going on with the shutdown. But what I'm trying to do, among other things, is to educate you and explain to you some things that you maybe haven't heard or maybe haven't thought of, and maybe it was the province of conspiracy theory or some other alternative that was not favorable. But this is what I'm talking about. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Biden coup, as I call it, which was the removal of Joe Biden as the candidate. He was the candidate. All the primaries were over. He won all the primaries. Something like 12 million votes or something like that. Okay? And yet they got rid of him. They got rid of the candidate. It basically created a situation where Trump would win. Why did this happen? Who did this? What's behind this? So if you want to understand the Biden coup, the quiet donor class intervention that I know that you don't even think about, that shoved aside a sitting president who won every primary. I submit that you can't start in 2024. You have to go back because the Democrats, they have a habit. They have a ritual. They have a reflex. Every time a Democrat shows signs of, and once again, this is Jake, who is a Democrat, a New Deal Democrat, but a Democrat nonetheless, telling you this. So nobody write into the show or call into the show and say, oh, Jake is, won't see reason and he just sees what. No, Jake sees. Jake sees. And this is Jake telling you now. So every time a Democrat, getting back to what I was saying, every time a Democrat shows signs of genuine independence, every time one threatens the banking elite, and this is what it is. It's the money power. The banking elite, the permanent financial class, the money power that really runs the show, the very same machine steps in and pushes them off the road because they don't want the New Deal back. They hated it. They hated it in 1935, and they hate it now, 110 years later, 90 years later. So the blueprint for this wasn't written, it's my premise, in 2024. It was written decades ago. Carter was maybe the first, chosen not by voters so much, but by the Rockefeller, Brzezinski, Trilateral world, the global managerial elite of the late 1970s who wanted a blank slate, who thought the United States industrial economy, which was a full-set economy, had gotten too big for his britches and had to be toned down. And this is globalization that you have heard of. This is where it comes from. The dismantling of 60,000 factories and the transmitting of them, either whole cloth or often in pieces, to other parts, because what the Trilateral Commission did is they divided into the world into 3 economic zones. Other parts of the world, often with governments that are our enemies. And this caused the concomitant, concordant impoverishment of the United States and the suffering that caused the people to go to just a con man and a grifter like Donald Trump, because that's what he is. That's what persuaded them to do it. And this is where it comes from. It's shaped by their design, you see, of the Trilateral Commission, not rather than economic demand. And then they perfected this method with Obama. Obama was not a grassroots eruption. He was constructed, he was built, he was curated by the same donor intellectual complex. Slip into the Senate, first the Illinois Senate. His speech in 2004, which was so impressive, stayed just long enough for a photo, not long enough for a paper trail. Run before you have a voting record worth attacking. Does this sound like anybody who was just elected mayor of New York City? Well, this is what I'm telling you. I'm trying to explain this to you. There's pattern here, you see? So, run before you have a voting record worth attacking, promise symbolism, deliver compliance. People expected out of Obama a progressive crusader. You know, the first black president armed with history, fire, moral weight. Instead, they got the blank slate technocrat of the trilateral dream. So here we are, comes the crash of 2008. Derivatives imploded. Lehman collapsed. I mean, this is really serious. I just went over this earlier in the show, but it bears repeating because this is where our present malaise comes from that I talked about at the beginning of the show with regard, yesterday, with regard to the destruction, the demolition psychosis of Donald Trump, destroying one of the wings of the White House and putting up a gala ballroom. So, getting back to this, in 2008, derivatives imploded, Lehman collapsed, 3.1 million foreclosures, 10 million bankruptcies, and the financial architecture of the country, it sat in a smoking crater, bombed out. And Obama walked into that closed-door meeting with the banky bosses, Jamie Dimon, the derivative kings, the risk wizards, who sent the country on fire. And we don't have the transcript, but we do have Obama's line. I'm the only thing between you and the pitchforks. Now look at it. Really look at it. That's not a threat. That's an offer. That is not a confrontation. That is a courtship. That is quid pro quo in the making. That is, what are you going to do for me? That is the opening line of a negotiation between a president who wants a second term and a financial elite who can make it happen, but who wants guarantees. And let's be honest, nobody tells the truth about those meetings, not in public. But if you caught half those guys after 2 drinks and a non-disclosure agreement, they'd probably admit the whole thing was less policy discussion and more, let's make sure the pitchforks never reach the penthouse. That's how Washington works when the stakes are existential like this. And if you follow the results of what occurred, the deal becomes obvious. No banker prosecutions, talked about that earlier in the show. No C-suite indictments. TARP. This ridiculous thing. I mean, can you imagine this? TARP is announced, and what it does is it bails out the bankers, and it allows them to continue doing what they are doing. Does nothing for the ordinary American. And it's pitched and it's sold, and I think that Americans must have just been in a collective stupor with whatever sitcom was popular at that time, or whatever fast food was going on, or whatever sports was going on, because nobody said anything about it. But that's what TARP did. Derivatives markets, bigger than before. Bonuses, restored. No new Glass-Steagall. No structural reform. Homeowners, let them eat cake. Let them drown. The SEC, asleep. The DOJ, handcuffed. Obama didn't tame Wall Street. He protected it. And worse, he took responsibility for their crimes. When Roosevelt faced a similar catastrophe, he said this. He said the money changers have come off their high seats in the temple and have failed. When Obama took office, he actually said this. He said this. We have failed. I mean, come on. As if the drywall hanger in Phoenix created CDOs, CDO credit default. As if a hospice nurse in Akron invented synthetic swabs. That was the tell. That was the confession. That was the moment the donor class learned that the Democratic presidency could be domesticated. And the rage that followed, the despair, the rupture, the sense of abandonment, that laid the emotional groundwork for Donald Trump. And that's why the Biden coup, and it was a coup, rings with such violence, because Biden broke the tradition. Say what you want about Joe Biden, he was a good man, and he believed in the New Deal. But Biden broke that tradition. He wasn't a blank slate. He wasn't a donor project. He wasn't a trilateral shadow puppet. He had a policy. He had a real policy. He wanted to do things. And the things he wanted to do, a lot of them were aimed directly at the financial elite. 25% corporate alternative minimum tax. 25%. I always laugh at this because you know what the top rate during Eisenhower was? 90%. I never heard anybody complain about 90%. So this is just 25%. Top rate, 28%. 28% capital gains. Now this is really good because this is how a lot of oligarchs and rich people make their money. Some of them work, but a lot of them invest and they get capital gains. And he wanted to assess this yearly at stated value. So a second Biden term would not have been performative, it would not have been symbolic, and it was not negotiable. This was a declaration of war, but it was just, if it was me, I would have probably shot my mouth off, being part Irish as I am. And I would have said, you rich guys suck, and you don't help out, and you need to help out. Biden didn't say that. He said, you guys got rich off of America. And instead of saying it's a sin because the way they do it is by grinding the faces of the poor and committing all sorts of immoral and unethical and illegal acts. And if an act is illegal, they go to Congress and get a law passed to make it legal. But he said this, just pay your fair share. Great, you got rich, that's great. And this really would have helped as far as the deficits are concerned. It wouldn't have gotten rid of them, but it would have been a nice start. Sunset the 2017 Trump tax scam provisions, which if Biden had been in office in December of 2025, which is just a month off, they would have sunsetted. They won't now. You see, this is what he wanted to do. And to this, it was like, I can imagine the donor class sitting there and saying, what? Pay our fair share? Are you kidding me? This is a declaration of war. And the donor class, the money power, reacted the only way they know how. Panic, pressure, leaks, media manipulation, back channel ultimatums, and finally the soft coup. This forced, gracious withdrawal, spearheaded by Obama and Nancy Pelosi, whose husband Paul is a financier, this gracious withdrawal. And they said, we'll give you 2 weeks, we'll give you 3 weeks to go out on your own. If not, we're going to go public. And they were willing to do it. So the forced, gracious withdrawal that wasn't gracious, and it wasn't voluntary. It wasn't improvisation. It wasn't crisis management. It wasn't concern for democracy. It was the culmination of a 50-year habit of removing Democratic leaders who threatened the banks. Obama internalized that object. He got it. And he got a second term because of it. Biden refused to. And that is why Joe Biden had to be erased. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it.
And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And kind of what have we been doing in yesterday's show? a weekend show, and today I'm doing the weekend show right now, is to talk about, do some deeper dives. And I'm being critical of the Democratic Party as I see it. And I'm not just a knee-jerk, lockstep Democrat. I'm a particular type of Democrat. I'm not a corporatist. I'm not a Clintonista. I'm not a guerrilla Democrat. I'm not a color group Democrat. I am a New Deal Democrat. And I've explained to you why that is, and will doubtless do so in other shows as well. But I think I've already done that in this show, so we're going to move on. So why are we in this situation that we're in right now? Not coming full circle, but coming up to the present. The Democrats had the tools to stop Trump, and they chose not to. And I'm highly critical of them because of the way this was done. That they decided to use a Republican tactic and do a shutdown of the government. Yeah, I absolutely admit that this was their last chance to get back that $880 billion that basically is just being thieved by Trump and his fascist cabal. But it didn't have to happen this way, and there were a lot of other things they could have done, and they chose to do this instead. And I'm against them on that. The Democrats had the tools to stop Trump, and they chose not to. This is how they could have used Section 3 in 2021 of the 14th Amendment. Secretaries of State could have initiated proceedings. They could have tied impeachment to insurrection findings. They could have built a national litigation pipeline. Instead, they bet everything on norms and vibes and polling. You know, when January 6, 2025 came around, they didn't say anything about that. And they instructed their members not to say anything. Why? Didn't test well with the public. I mean, this shows the fatal timidity of the Democrats that I excoriate them for, that I chastise them for, that let a madman like Trump reassemble power. Because they had the power, they had the text, and they had the moment, and they walked away. There are moments in history where the Constitution doesn't whisper, it shouts. And in early 2021, the 14th Amendment was screaming. It was screaming from the rooftops. And what is that? That is Section 3, the disqualification clause, the a priori disqualification clause. It means like before anything. A priori like means before anything. From the very first, from before the very first, if such a thing were possible. This is the firewall that the founders built for exactly this type of man. Well, I mean, it's one of the Reconstruction Amendments, but it's the New Birth of Freedom, and I think it's appropriate to call the ones who created it founders. A firewall the founders built for exactly this kind of man, this kind of faction, this kind of attempted seizure of state power. And it says in pertinent part that no person shall hold office. And that's even like dog catcher. That's like any office, state or federal. Doesn't matter. Who, having previously taken an oath to uphold, support, and defend the Constitution of the United States, engaged in insurrection, or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. And this is not ambiguous. This is not poetic. It's not subject to vibes or panels or bipartisan brunches. It's a shield. And the Democrats let it rust in the corner like a museum piece. I mean, picture the timeline, will you? January 6th, this is 2021 we're talking about. Trump sends the mob. He says, I'm going to be with you, but he didn't go. He was just like Hitler in the not the Reichstag, but the beer hall putsch in Munich. He got in a car on a side street and he left. Same with this. Same with Trump. He got in his little bulletproof shielded presidential limo and took off. Didn't go with him. Said he was going to go. He said, I'll be there with you. But he didn't go. So on January 6th, he does that. January 7th, nation is in shock. January 8th through 20th, the constitutional window is wide open. The secretaries of state are ready to hear arguments. The courts are ready to issue emergency orders. I mean, they are ready. They are open for business after what happens on January 6th. Impeachment managers have the clearest record in American history. The public is raging for accountability. This was the single most legally fortified moment the country had ever seen. And what did the Democratic leadership do? They blinked. They hedged. They treated an insurrection like it was a public relations problem. Instead of invoking Section 3, 14th Amendment, and launching a national disqualification process, the Democrats threw the entire future of the country on a single fragile bet. Maybe the Senate Republicans will finally find a conscience, they thought. Brother, that was the political equivalent of betting the mortgage on a raccoon picking horses. They knew the GOP wouldn't convict. The math was obvious. The caucus was terrified of Trump's base. They still are. And still they tied disqualification to impeachment instead of running the parallel constitutional track that Section 3 explicitly allows. They could have done both, but they refused to do it. It's just like what's the old scriptural adage, you should not have ignored the one, you should have done the one, but not have ignored the other. And they did. This wasn't strategy. This is like superstition dressed up as law. And they had every mechanism. They had secretaries of state, could have initiated Section 3 hearings on their own authority. They had state courts, could have taken evidence, declared Trump disqualified. Federal courts could have been petitioned for declaratory judgment. The whole thing was on film. The whole thing was on video, for crying out loud. Federal courts could have been petitioned for declaratory judgment, a concurrent congressional resolution, not binding, but politically devastating. Impeachment is politically devastating. Even if you don't get convicted, it's still politically devastating. Voters don't like it. And this lays the groundwork for state actions. There could have been coordination with attorneys general, creating a multi-state protective wall. Instead, nothing. Silence. Delay. The familiar Democratic lullaby, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But history gets ahead of you if you hesitate. And Trump was history, and Trump did. And this is the myth of norms. This is where the Democratic Party fell into its oldest trap, believing the Constitution is self-enforcing, believing that norms will save them, believing that institutions have an internal compass and they don't need the human factor to work, that they just work all by themselves. But that's not what it is. The Constitution, it's like a sword. But if you don't swing it, it's just a piece of decorative metal that if you touch it, you might cut yourself on. Norms, those are the rules of a polite dinner party, not the defenses of a republic under siege. Institutions, they don't have a conscience. They have operators. And Trump operators were faster, colder, and hungrier. And this is where the tragedy seats itself. Inaction masquerading as integrity. Hesitation dressed up as principle. By refusing to pull the trigger, Democrats unintentionally gave Trump the greatest gift imaginable. Time. Time to regroup. Time to unwrite the story. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. That's the story. Time to purge enemies. Time to weaponize the House. Time to turn martyrdom into momentum. Time to retake the party. Time to rebuild the machine. And every day they waited, the constitutional window narrowed until it closed. By late 2021, it was over. The 14th Amendment, Section 3 had gone from a constitutional sword to a law review topic. Democrats let only guaranteed protection evaporate. The only guaranteed protection, and they let it go. And here's the bitter twist. Only a Greek playwright could love. By refusing to use Section 3 in 2021, Democrats guaranteed they would try to use it in 2024, when it was politically weaker, legally riskier, and socially toxic. They took the tool built for the moment of crisis and saved it for the moment of maximum backlash. That is not strategy. This is malpractice on a national scale. This is how republics fall. Not from the lack of tools, but from the refusal to use them. The Constitution gave them a weapon. They refused to pick it up. And once you refuse a weapon in a crisis, a lot of times you don't get a second chance. They had Trump on the ropes, and they let him back in. Not because and we might lose the country, quite frankly. Not because they were outgunned, but they lost it because they were afraid to fire the gun. They were afraid to wield or swing the sword. They were afraid to fight. And that's it for this edition of Politics by Jake. The next edition will be on Saturday, November 22nd. Until then, have a good week, and we will see you on Saturday, November 22nd. Bye now.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable.
And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
Look around you. The systems are failing. The currency, the court, the Constitution. And no one is coming to save you. You feel it. You see it. But you've been told to ignore it. This isn't paranoia. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's collapse. Designed, accelerated, and now unavoidable. So what's your plan? What happens when the banks close? When the grid goes down? When they come knocking and you have nothing protected, nothing structured, nothing left. You don't need a bunker. You need a protocol. The collapse protocol is the plan for people who still think clearly, who want to live, thrive, and protect what's theirs, even in a world gone mad. You don't have time. You don't have backup. But now you have this. Collapse protocol from Twain Consulting before the end begins. Contact us as soon as you can. Facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call us at 213-465-0639.
And now let's pause for a brief commercial message.
Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/Politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together.